Have you ever noticed a strange, quiet shame that creeps in after you realize you care more than someone else? What if the heaviest burden you carry is not the pain of being let down, but the profound embarrassment of having a heart that still tries so hard? If you have ever felt foolish for caring too much, for giving too much, or for simply being the one who reaches out first, this is for you. It usually happens in the quiet moments after the fact. You sent a message that showed your true feelings. You stayed late to support someone who rarely supports you. You offered your forgiveness to someone who did not even ask for it. You allowed yourself to hope. And when the response was cold, empty, or indifferent, a sudden wave of humiliation washed over you. In that instant, you did not just feel disappointed by them, you felt angry with yourself. You promised yourself you would never be so open again. You told yourself you were naive. You began to build a silent, private case against your own warmth, gathering evidence of every single time your kindness was met with nothing. But here is the truth. Most of your suffering is not caused by the fact that you cared. It is caused by the brutal way you punish yourself for it. In Buddhist wisdom, there is a deep understanding of our fundamental nature. To feel, to connect, and to offer compassion is the natural state of the human spirit. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when we attach ourselves to how the world should react to us, and when we resist our own true nature. When you feel embarrassed by your own care, you are essentially going to war with your own goodness. You are taking something pure and turning it into a source of inner conflict. Imagine a quiet spring of water flowing from the side of a mountain. It does not calculate where its water goes. It does not feel foolish when its water is absorbed by dry, cracked dirt instead of a beautiful garden. It simply flows because it is its nature to flow. It gives without waiting for the soil to say, "Thank you." But human beings are different. When we pour our care out and it falls on barren ground, we immediately try to plug the spring. We build heavy stone walls to stop the flow. We trap the pressure inside, exhausting ourselves in a desperate effort to keep our own nature contained. Think about your own life. How many times have you walked away from a conversation replaying what you said, cringing at your own enthusiasm? How often have you sat alone, feeling like you are simply too much for the people around you? You feel exposed. You convince yourself that caring less is a sign of strength, and that caring deeply is a flaw that must be fixed. Ask yourself, are you truly upset about what happened? Or are you punishing yourself for being brave enough to feel? What are you afraid will happen if you simply forgive yourself for having a kind heart? Stop, breathe. Observe this feeling of embarrassment without wrapping it in a heavy story. You do not need to defend your care. You do not need to hide it away behind a locked door. Let the feeling of vulnerability rise without making it your entire identity. Your ability to care is not a mistake. It is the very essence of your humanity. Peace is not found in becoming cold. It is found in accepting the warmth you naturally possess. But when we feel embarrassed by our own light, we begin to hide in the shadows of our own making. We turn against ourselves, questioning our every move. And this is where the quietest, most destructive habit takes root. Because beneath every feeling of embarrassment is a harsh judgment waiting to be delivered in a courtroom where you are both the judge and the accused. 2. The second arrow of shame. Here is a truth that is difficult to face. The deepest wounds are rarely inflicted by others. They are inflicted by our own hands, in the silent aftermath of a disappointment. When you put your heart on the line and it is met with coldness, there is an immediate, sharp pain. But what if the lingering agony you feel is not actually from the rejection? What if the true source of your exhaustion is the story you tell yourself immediately after? Imagine this very common scene. You send a thoughtful message, pouring your genuine feelings into the words. Hours pass, and the response is a single, hollow word. Or perhaps you step up to help a friend in crisis, giving them your time and energy. only to be completely ignored when your own life gets difficult. The initial sting of that realization is real. It hurts. It is entirely human to feel that disappointment. But then, almost immediately, a darker emotion takes over. You stare at the screen, or you sit alone in your room, and the heat of shame rises to your face. You call yourself foolish. You tell yourself you are naive, desperate, or weak. You vow to never be the first one to reach out again. You wish you could reach through time and erase your own vulnerability. In Buddhist thought, there is a profound teaching known as the two arrows. When misfortune or pain strikes, the Buddha explained, it is like being shot with a sudden arrow. The first arrow is the event itself, the loss, the rejection, the physical pain, the silence of someone you care about. This first arrow is unavoidable. It is simply a part of the human experience. But immediately after the first arrow strikes, we often shoot ourselves with a second arrow. This second arrow is our reaction to the pain. It is the anger, the self-blame, the embarrassment, and the bitter narrative we spin. The first arrow brings pain. The second arrow brings suffering. Imagine walking through a quiet, ancient forest. A dry, heavy branch snaps from a tree above and falls, striking your shoulder. It hurts. The pain is sudden and undeniable. But instead of simply rubbing your shoulder, tending to the bruise, and walking forward, you pick up the fallen branch. You begin to strike yourself with it repeatedly, furious at yourself for walking under that tree, angry that you did not see it coming, and punishing yourself for being bruised. This is exactly what you do when you feel ashamed of your own care. You take someone else's inability to receive your warmth, and you use it to beat yourself down. Think about your own life. When someone does not meet your depth with their own, do you simply let the moment pass, or do you pick up the branch? How many times have you fired that second arrow at your own heart, turning a simple misunderstanding into a deep flaw in your character? Ask yourself, why do you believe that being cold makes someone strong and being warm makes you foolish? Pause. Notice the weight of this habit. The next time you feel that familiar flush of embarrassment after caring too much, catch yourself. Let the first arrow hurt. Allow yourself to feel the natural sadness of a connection that missed its mark, but refuse to draw the bow for the second. You do not need to punish yourself for bleeding. You do not need to apologize for the size of your heart. Stop letting the actions of others dictate the value of your own spirit. But avoiding the second arrow requires us to look closely at where it comes from, because the shame we feel does not appear out of nowhere. It is the verdict delivered in a very specific place, and this is where the trial against your own goodness begins. 3. The private courtroom in your mind. What if the most exhausting battle you fight is the one completely contained within your own thoughts? Here is a hard truth. You are not just suffering from the sudden sting of being unappreciated. You are suffering because you have placed your own soul on trial. When we feel the heavy heat of embarrassment after caring too much, we rarely just let the emotion pass. Instead, we retreat into our minds and open a relentless, private court case. We become the prosecutor, the judge, and the accused all at once. We drag out old memories as evidence. We replay the awkward pause in a conversation. We scrutinize the enthusiasm in our text messages, analyzing the exact moment we revealed too much. We present our kindness as proof of our own foolishness. We cross-examine our own motives until we feel entirely inadequate. In Buddhist thought, there is a deep understanding of how the mind creates its own suffering through attachment to narratives. The mind is a master storyteller, constantly weaving complex tales to make sense of pain or rejection. But these stories are not reality. They are illusions born from fear. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that mindfulness is not about winning the argument in your head. It is about realizing you do not have to attend the trial. You suffer because you attach yourself to the verdict, believing that a temporary feeling of embarrassment defines your permanent worth. Imagine a solitary candle burning in a quiet, dark room. Its light naturally reaches into the corners, softly offering warmth. But instead of simply letting it shine, you place heavy, angled mirrors all around it, reflecting its light back onto itself in harsh, blinding glares. You sit in the center of this room, judging the way the flame flickers. You analyze every movement, criticizing the wax, trying to control a draft that does not even exist. The light is beautiful, but you have trapped it in a prison of your own relentless reflection. Think about how this looks in your daily life. You lie in bed at night, staring at the dark ceiling, replaying a moment at work where you eagerly offered to help a colleague, only to be brushed off. You pull up old messages on your phone, rereading them, cringing at your own warmth and availability. You compile a mental list of every time you were the one who cared more in a friendship or a relationship. You build a flawless, ironclad case against yourself, convincing your own heart that its openness is a dangerous liability. Ask yourself, who is actually winning this case? Is this relentless self-judgment bringing you peace, or is it just feeding your fear? What if the evidence you are gathering is not proof of your weakness, but proof of your immense, unshakable capacity to love? Stop, breathe, step down from the witness stand. The next time the gavel falls in your mind and the accusations begin, simply observe the thought without following it. Let the feeling of embarrassment rise and watch it drift away like a heavy cloud moving across an empty sky. You do not have to answer the charges. You do not have to defend your heart to your ego. You are allowed to care deeply without apologizing for it. You can dismiss the court, because peace is not found by proving yourself right or wrong in the aftermath of a disappointment. It is found by leaving the room entirely. But leaving the courtroom feels dangerous. We hold on to this harsh judgment because we secretly believe it protects us from future pain. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. The illusion of playing it safe. What if the walls you build to protect yourself are actually the very things keeping you trapped in suffering? Here is a truth few people want to face. Closing your heart does not keep the pain out. It only locks the fear inside. After the deep embarrassment of caring too much, it is entirely normal to want to change your approach. You make a silent vow to play it safe. You decide to match the coldness of the world around you. You purposely delay your responses to messages so you do not seem too eager. You withhold your enthusiasm at work, in your relationships, and with your friends. You swallow your compliments. You hide your joy. You convince yourself that by expecting nothing and offering very little, you are finally protecting yourself from the sharp sting of being unappreciated. You confuse numbness with safety. But in Buddhist wisdom, there is a profound distinction between true non-attachment and emotional suppression. Buddhism teaches that peace comes from letting things flow naturally, not from building massive dams to stop the river. When you force yourself to stop caring, you are not actually practicing detachment. You are still deeply attached. You are just attached to the fear of being hurt. Aversion, the desperate need to push things away, is simply another form of clinging. By trying so hard to shield yourself from embarrassment, you are resisting your own natural state, and that resistance creates a heavy, exhausting suffering of its own. Imagine a bird that has been startled by a sudden, violent storm outside. In its panic, it flies into an open cage in a quiet room and uses its own beak to pull the heavy iron door shut from the inside. It sits in the shadows, believing it has finally found absolute safety because the wind and the rain can no longer reach it. But in doing so, it has traded the vast, limitless sky for a tiny, rigid prison. It survives the storm, but it forgets how to fly. Think about how you lock the cage in your own modern life. You meet someone new, and instead of showing your genuine interest, You hold back, waiting for them to prove they care first. You feel a sudden burst of passion for a creative project, but you quickly quiet yourself so no one can mock your ambition. You feel deeply lonely on a quiet evening, but you absolutely refuse to reach out to a friend, convinced that total isolation is safer than the risk of being ignored. You spend so much of your precious energy trying to appear unaffected that you eventually just feel entirely empty. Ask yourself, is this numbness actually bringing you true peace? What are you truly protecting when you hold back your warmth, your heart, or simply your pride? Is the fear of looking foolish worth the price of feeling nothing at all? Stop, breathe. Notice the tightness in your chest when you try to force yourself not to care. Let the desire to connect rise without fighting it. You do not have to give your soul to everyone you meet, but you must stop suffocating your own spirit just to feel secure. Let the cage door open. You are not powerless, and your warmth is not a weakness. Because true strength is not found in becoming unreachable. It is found in remaining open, even when the world is unpredictable. But if remaining open is our natural state, why is it so difficult? Why do we feel such a profound urge to condemn our own warmth the moment it is not returned? And this is where the next truth begins. Because beneath the illusion of safety, there is a deeper reason we put ourselves on trial. 5. Why we punish our own goodness. What if the reason you judge your own heart is simply because it feels safer than accepting the truth about someone else? Here is the reality we rarely want to admit. We punish our own goodness because we are desperate for control. When you pour your energy into a friendship, a relationship, or a project, and it falls flat, you are left with a quiet, lingering ache. You cannot control how the other person responds. You cannot force them to see your value. That feeling of powerlessness is terrifying. So, the mind plays a clever, devastating trick. It decides that if the rejection was your fault because you were too eager, too soft, or too available, then you can fix it. You start believing that if you just shrink yourself, if you just care less next time, you will regain control. You tell yourself that the problem is not their lack of depth, but your overwhelming abundance. In Buddhist thought, one of the deepest lessons is recognizing the illusion of control. We suffer immensely because we cling to the belief that we can manage the actions and emotions of the world around us. But this is a trap of the ego. The ego would rather carry the heavy burden of shame than accept the terrifying reality that we cannot force others to understand us. By putting your own goodness on trial, you are trying to force a sense of order onto a world that is inherently unpredictable. Buddhism reminds us that our true suffering comes not from the external world, but from demanding that the external world validate our inner worth. Imagine a warm, bright fire burning steadily in the center of a hearth. A person walks into the room, shivering from the cold, but instead of stepping close to the flames, they stand in the far corner, hesitant and afraid. Eventually, they turn around and walk back out into the freezing night. If you were that fire, your mind would immediately begin to criticize the flames. You would tell yourself you burned too brightly, that you were too intense, or that your sparks were too wild. You would try to extinguish your own heat. You would blame your own warmth, entirely ignoring the simple fact that the other person was just not ready to step into the light. Think about this in your everyday life. You try to resolve a long-standing family conflict with patience and empathy, only to be met with stubborn silence. You offer your unconditional support to a partner who remains emotionally distant, and instead of realizing that they simply lack the capacity to meet you where you are, you immediately begin to dissect your own character. You blame your tone, your timing, and your boundless empathy. You convince yourself that your goodness is a fatal flaw. Ask yourself, are you truly ashamed of how much you care? Or are you just trying to find a logical reason for why someone else could not appreciate you. What if their inability to receive your warmth has absolutely nothing to do with your worth? Stop, breathe. Separate your action from their reaction. Let the feeling of rejection rise, but do not absorb it as your fault. Do your part, then release the outcome. Observe your kindness without requiring the world to applaud it. You do not have to fix someone else's inability to connect by breaking your own spirit. You do not need to take responsibility for the coldness of others. You only need to honor the fire within yourself. But honoring that fire does not mean clinging to it tightly, and this is where the next truth begins. 6. The wisdom of the open hand. What if the tighter you try to hold on to your pride, the more your peace slips away? Here is a profound truth. The exhaustion you feel is not from caring too much. It is from the immense, quiet effort of trying to control exactly how your care is received. After we feel the sharp embarrassment of being unappreciated, our instinct is to tighten our grip. We begin to measure our kindness drop by drop. We carefully calculate who deserves our time, tracking every message, every favor, and every smile. We grip our emotions so tightly, terrified that if we offer just a fraction too much, we will look foolish again. We become rigid, guarded, and constantly on edge, treating our own natural warmth like a dangerous currency that must be hoarded. In Buddhist thought, this tightness is the very root of suffering. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is the practice of non-attachment. But non-attachment does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you become cold or indifferent to the world. It means you offer your care without clinging to the outcome. It means realizing that the beauty of your kindness lies in the giving, not in the receiving. When you attach your ego to how someone else reacts, you are bound to suffer. But when you offer your warmth freely, with an open hand, there is nothing left to defend. Imagine walking along a beautiful beach and scooping up a handful of dry, fine sand. If you hold your hand perfectly open, letting the sand rest gently in your palm, it stays perfectly still. It rests easily. But the moment you become afraid of losing it, the moment you panic and clench your fist tightly to keep it safe, the sand begins to slip through the cracks of your fingers. The harder you squeeze your fist, the more you lose. It is the tension itself, the desperate need to control, that creates the loss. Think about how you treat your own affection in modern life. You start dating someone new, or you try to deepen a friendship, and the moment you feel a slight shift in their energy, you panic. You clench your fist. You start playing games, matching their silence, and holding back your genuine enthusiasm. You squeeze the life out of your own compassion, terrified that it will be wasted or blown away by their indifference. You turn your beautiful, natural capacity to love into a tense, rigid calculation. You are so focused on not looking foolish that you forget how to be free. Ask yourself, is this iron grip actually protecting your heart, or is it just exhausting your spirit? What would happen if you simply let your care exist in an open palm without trying to force the universe to applaud it? Stop, breathe, unclench your hands right now. Notice the tension you carry in your own body. Let the feeling of wanting to connect rise without measuring it. Do your part, offer your kindness, and then release the outcome entirely. Let the sand rest. You do not have to control how the world perceives your heart, because true peace is not found in forcing the right people to stay. It is found in realizing that what is meant for you will gladly rest in your open hand. But to live with an open hand, you must first do something incredibly brave. You must officially drop the charges you have brought against yourself. And this is where the true healing begins. 7. Dropping the charges against yourself. What if the only apology you truly need is the one you owe to yourself? Here is a truth that can change everything. You cannot heal a wound while you are still actively punishing the person who is bleeding. For months, or perhaps even years, you have held on to the guilt and embarrassment of caring too much. You have treated your own vulnerability as if it were a crime. You replay your moments of openness, the late-night messages, the second chances you gave, the times you were the only one holding a relationship together, and you cringe. You hold yourself in absolute contempt. You promise yourself that you will be colder, harder, and less available from now on. You treat your own kindness as a severe weakness that needs strict, unrelenting discipline. In Buddhist wisdom, the practice of loving kindness, often called metta, must always begin inward. Buddhism teaches that your compassion for the world is entirely incomplete if it does not first include yourself. You cannot practice true peace while you are still violently attached to your own perceived mistakes. We suffer because we believe that self-punishment is a form of growth. But true growth only happens in the soil of deep acceptance. Dropping the charges against yourself is not about pretending the pain did not happen. It is about realizing that having a soft, hopeful heart was never an offense that required a verdict. Imagine a heavy, dark courtroom where a fierce trial has been going on for years. The judge is exhausted, the witnesses have all gone home, and the evidence has long turned to dust. But the accused still sits quietly in the heavy wooden chair, hands bound, waiting for a final ruling. The door at the back of the courtroom is completely unlocked. The sun is shining brightly outside, but the accused stays in the shadows, believing they must serve a lifelong sentence for the simple crime of being human, for the crime of having a heart that tried to reach out. Think about how you treat yourself in the quiet moments of your own life. You take a risk and express your feelings to someone, and when they pull away, you spend the next 3 days calling yourself stupid. You try to mend a fractured family tie, and when it backfires, you mentally berate your own hopefulness. You scrutinize your every action, terrified of looking desperate. You treat yourself with a level of cold cruelty that you would never accept from a stranger and would never, ever offer to a friend in need. Ask yourself, how long are you going to sit in that dark room? How long will you keep punishing yourself for simply trying to love? If a dear friend came to you, deeply embarrassed that they cared too much about someone who let them down, would you mock them? Or would you comfort them? Stop, breathe, step away from the judge's bench. Forgive yourself right now. Let the feeling of self-blame rise, and then consciously choose to put it down. You do not need to defend your past actions. You do not need to apologize for hoping things would be different. You are allowed to simply say, I release the need to punish my own goodness. Because true liberation is not convincing the world to finally understand your worth. It is realizing you never needed to put your worth on trial in the first place. But once the trial is over and the heavy doors are opened, you are left standing in the light with a quiet, lingering question. How do you live in a hard world without becoming hard yourself? And this is where the next truth begins. 8. The quiet strength of remaining soft. What if the thick armor you built to protect yourself is the very thing making you so exhausted? Here is a truth that goes against everything the modern world teaches us. Softness is not a weakness. It is the ultimate form of strength. After we finally drop the charges against ourselves, a new, quiet fear often emerges. If we do not punish our own warmth, and if we do not build massive walls, how do we survive? We are constantly told that caring less gives us the upper hand. We see people who are detached, indifferent, and fiercely guarded, and we mistakenly view their numbness as power. We convince ourselves that if we can just become like stone, we will never feel the humiliating sting of being unappreciated again. But in Buddhist wisdom, true resilience is found in flexibility, not rigidity. The practice of mindfulness teaches us to remain open to the present moment, no matter how unpredictable it may be. Buddhism reminds us that everything is impermanent. People will disappoint us, seasons will change, and pain will arise. When we try to make ourselves hard and unfeeling to avoid this, we are resisting the natural flow of life. We believe we are keeping the pain out, but we are actually just deadening our own profound capacity to experience joy, connection, and peace. Imagine a massive tree standing alone in a wide valley during a violent storm. If the tree's branches are perfectly rigid and stiff, refusing to yield to the fierce wind, they will inevitably snap under the immense pressure. The rigid tree breaks because it tries to fight the storm with hardness. But look at the willow tree nearby. Its branches are soft, light, and deeply flexible. As the heavy winds blow, the willow bends gracefully. It moves with the storm. It looks entirely delicate, but it survives the darkest nights because it does not resist. Its softness is the very secret to its unshakable survival. Think about the invisible pressure you face every single day. You scroll through your phone and see endless advice about cutting people off, acting entirely unbothered, and guarding your emotions with iron gates. In modern relationships, the person who cares the least is often treated as the winner. In the workplace, cold cynicism is disguised as intelligence. You feel an immense, crushing pressure to put on a mask of pure indifference just to make it through the week. But carrying that heavy armor is exhausting. It takes a massive amount of spiritual energy to constantly pretend you do not care. Ask yourself, is this hardness truly serving your soul? What would happen if you stopped carrying the crushing weight of that armor? Are you actually avoiding pain, or are you just avoiding life? Stop, breathe, feel the heavy tension in your shoulders, and consciously let it drop. You do not need to be a stone to be safe. Let the storm pass without becoming the storm. Let the world be cold, but refuse to let it freeze your own warmth. You can bend without breaking. You can be deeply hurt, completely disappointed, and still refuse to let the actions of others change your fundamental nature. Because keeping your heart open in a world that constantly hurts it is not foolishness. It is the deepest form of courage. And this courage brings us to the final step of the journey, the moment you finally close the case and make peace with exactly who you are. 9. Closing the case and finding peace. What if the most beautiful thing about you is exactly what you have been trying to hide? Think back to that quiet, heavy shame we talked about at the very beginning of this journey, that burning embarrassment that washes over you when you realize you cared more, reached out first, or gave too much of your heart to someone who could not hold it. For so long, you have let that exact feeling act as the supreme judge of your worth. You gathered the evidence of your unanswered messages, your unreturned favors, and your open kindness, and you used it to build a flawless, relentless case against yourself. But now you know the truth. The pain of being let down was simply the first arrow. It was a natural part of living, but the exhausting trial in your mind, the constant self-blame, and the desperate attempt to numb your own feelings, that was the second arrow. And you are no longer willing to strike your own soul. In Buddhist thought, the highest form of peace is found in true acceptance. This does not just mean accepting the changing, unpredictable nature of the world around you. It means accepting the deep, unchangeable truth of your own nature, your capacity to love, to connect, and to pour warmth into a cold world is not a flaw that needs to be disciplined. It is a profound gift that needs to be honored. You suffer only when you attach your inner peace to how the external world reacts to your grace. Imagine standing up in that dark, heavy courtroom of your mind. For years, the loud gavel has been striking. For years, you have sat in the shadows, constantly apologizing for your own light. But today, the room is entirely silent. You look at the empty judge's chair. You look at the scattered papers of evidence against you. And instead of waiting for a verdict of approval that will never come, you simply turn around and walk away. You push open the heavy wooden doors and step out into the warm, bright sunlight. You leave the heavy armor on the floor. You step into the vast, open world, completely unguarded, but entirely free. Think about your life moving forward from this exact moment. There will still be times when you care more than someone else. There will still be moments of silence, conversations that feel entirely one-sided, and people who simply do not possess the depth to understand your spirit. The world will not suddenly become perfect. But the profound difference is this: you will no longer blame yourself for their limitations. When the disappointment comes, you will not panic. When the coldness arrives, you will not internalize it. You will observe it, accept it, and let it pass quietly, knowing with absolute certainty that their reaction is merely a reflection of their own capacity, not a measure of your worth. Ask yourself one final time: are you finally ready to forgive yourself for having a beautiful heart? Stop, breathe. Let the heavy burden fall from your shoulders. Stop fighting your own goodness. Keep your hand completely open. Let the sand rest easily in your palm. If someone chooses to walk away from your fire, let them walk into the cold. But never, ever extinguish your own flames just to make someone else feel comfortable in the dark. The world desperately needs people who are brave enough to care. It needs your softness. It needs your light. Do not apologize for the size of your spirit. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.